Well, the Labour Party manifesto leak meant that this week wasn't quite what had been planned for the election campaign. 4 weeks tonight, we'll be digesting the results, so let's touch in with our regular panel of experts and assess how things are going. I'm joined by Camilla Cavendish, who is Head of Policy at Number 10 under David Cameron, and the journalist and Labour activist Paul Mason. Good evening to both of you. Camilla, listening to Jess Phillips there, that's quite an interesting tactic that, however and whatever way this manifesto draft was leaked, it gave candidates something to speak about that wasn't Corbyn.
Well, I think that's probably right. And she said, you know, there's a big dividing line between the parties. Well, boy, there is a big dividing line now. I mean, the question is, will the country go for a prospectus that is, you know, I don't know what Paul's going to say about it, but I mean, it's a throwback in many ways. It's a throwback to the 70s. It's got huge uncosted promises.
Yes.
I don't think the country will go for that.
But in fact, Theresa May, rather than talking about the manifesto, which she certainly won't do, she's sticking to Corbyn, and she's saying today in the north of England, you know, that Corbyn has absolutely abandoned proud, patriotic working-class voters. She doesn't want any truck with talking about manifesto.
I think let's talk about the manifesto first, though, because for us it was an absolute, I mean, fortuitous thing in a way, because it created drama in the election as well as content, which there hasn't been much of. And it draws a clear line. I mean, when people say it's a throwback to the 1970s, remember, so many voters are, you know, over my age, mid-50s and above, 60s and 70s. Many of them would look at the 60s and 70s as the very good period.
Yeah, but you've got to get the younger voters who are simply not voting.
Well, when the younger voters hear, I couldn't wait to get out and say, you know, we will give you a free university education like I had in the 70s that enabled my generation to have such great social mobility. I think they understand that.
But who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, exactly. Who is going to pay for it?
That's to come, isn't it? I wouldn't worry about the uncosted nature of it. I know the team who are working on the costings. They have been over it several times. The attack line that I think is sensible is, what is the macroeconomic impact of taking so much tax out? The tax will be easily collected.
Tell me, just on that question of the leak, because it's interesting, because it added drama. Was it the moderates leaking trying to change it, or was it the left leaking it going, this is better than having Corbyn sitting there next week and delivering it?
When I first heard of it, I did suspect it was the left, but I'm pretty confident now that it was Jeremy Corbyn's enemies.
So, some popular measures, you know, obviously motherhood and apple pie, let's have, you know, $6 billion a year for education, $6 billion a year for the NHS. By the end of the Parliament. Let's have no tuition fees and so forth. But some things did strike a chord, even with you.
Oh, I think there are. I mean, I think this is the tragedy of these things, is there are usually some quite interesting things in any manifesto. There are a couple of things in the Labour manifesto which actually are quite sensible. I mean, abolishing the idea of quarterly returns for small business. I mean, hooray. You know, actually nationalising the railways, a huge number of people who are trying to get in on Southern Rail, who have not been able to get to work for 2 months, know there is something wrong with the railway.
In London, but actually up north is a bit better.
The East Coast Main Line actually was nationalised. It's worked really well. In fact, Network Rail is nationalised, so it's a slightly odd, but you can do something with the franchises. It's not entirely crazy. It's just that the totality of it doesn't add up.
But balancing out what Theresa May said at the beginning of that she was actually going to stick to the Conservative view of limited immigration to tens of thousands, whereas Jeremy Corbyn said very little at all about immigration. Was she right, do you think, to announce that immigration, which they've never managed to do?
It didn't surprise me at all that she has stuck to that. I think she believes that you must have a stretch target. And I think she also believes that to move away from that... Well, that is a very good question, but to move away from that at a time when immigration is such a huge issue for the country would be a mistake. However, she did keep the students in the target, which is going to make it much, much harder.
But on the other hand, Jeremy Corbyn says nothing much about immigration, which actually is going to go down very badly with the UKIP voters you want to get.
Well, Labour's main pitch in this election is not to UKIP
voters. Okay, some Labour voters voted UKIP last time.
And even then, Labour's main pitch, I think, will be to the centre in politics, that it wants to convince that it has a humane and stable and thought-through solution to what kind of country this country becomes after Brexit. Now, such people work for companies. Those companies are saying to them, and they can hear it, look, guys, there won't be any less migrants after Brexit because we cannot function without it. So I think Theresa May keeping the tens of thousands target is an interesting thing, because you could have slipped the students out of it, making it more achievable, but she missed it every other time. So why should she hit it?
But surely Jeremy Corbyn's got to say something about immigration, because, you know, in those 45 pages, there was virtually nothing there.
Well, look, the point about what there is there is an offer to people to say, we can solve a lot of what your problems seem to be by very radical measures which redistribute wealth and empower you at work. Because the interesting thing is when you talk to working class people about migrants, immigration, you find very, very few who claim to dislike the migrants themselves. And therefore it's a different kind of xenophobia and nationalism that we're dealing with. And I think you can deal with it by radical economic offers to people who believe they've been given nothing by the present system.
Paul, it's work that's missing from the Labour manifesto. Where are the jobs? How are we going to create the jobs? What are the jobs in the future?
We've got plenty of jobs, it's just none of them pay decent wages.
What's the prospectus for skills? Where's the technical education? Those are the big questions that people want answers.
There's a 10 billion budget on skills.
Luckily, we've got 4 more weeks to answer some of these questions.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.